Well, I'd like to call on me to introduce our next award winner of the Sidney Hook Award. It's my very pleasant duty to introduce an individual who, as much as anyone I've ever known, deserves the old-fashioned title of citizen. If we hear that word at all these days as a title for someone, it is ironic. Orson Welles' 1941 movie Citizen Kane was not about a man dedicated to public spiritedness, and good citizenship awards usually go to somebody who's saved a dog from drowning or planted geraniums in the public square. Even the word citizen now has a whiff of unfriendliness to our undocumented neighbors. That leaves us with a quandary for how do we describe the man who is neither a politician nor a journalist, who devotes himself to improving our common life. I guess we could call that person a community activist. But that word seems to mean something else. I'm going to stick with citizen, and I'm here to introduce and give an award to Citizen Ward Connerly. Now, Ward is president and founder of the American Civil Rights Institute, ACRI, which is a not-for-profit that aims to educate people about the need to move beyond race. That is, to move beyond race as a legal category and move beyond it as a category generally in our way of perceiving each other, and to put in its place a more robust conception of the individual. ACRI, I believe, plays to the good nature, the goodwill, and the common perception of the overwhelming majority of American citizens. It grew out of a successful campaign in 1995 and 1996, led by Ward, to pass California's Proposition 209, the ballot measure that overturned state-sponsored racial and gender preferences. Proposition 209 essentially took the language of the Federal Civil Rights Act and made it state law as well. Ward subsequently led the efforts to pass similar ballot measures in the states of Washington, Michigan, and this year ending, Nebraska. Ward was born in Leesville, Louisiana in 1839. 1839. He's really old. But here at the National Association of Scholars, we don't make age that much of an issue. After a very long youth in Louisiana, and the death of his mother, he was raised by first his grandmother and then his maternal uncle and aunt. That Uncle James, Jesse, has become the title of Ward's newest book, for sale out in the lobby here, Lessons from My Uncle James, Beyond Skin Color to the Content of Our Character. Uncle James was a man with a third-grade education who, during World War II, I believe worked in the shipyards in Washington State, where Ward spent a few years growing up, and then moved to Sacramento, where more or less Ward has spent the rest of his life. Those lessons that Ward took from his uncle included a kind of just undefeatable spirit to enter into the things that he was going to do and make them work. Well, the life story picks up as this. He went to Sacramento State College and graduated in political science in 1962. While he was an undergraduate student there, he campaigned against housing discrimination. Now, what we do as undergraduate students so often seems to encode in ourselves the things we're going to do for the rest of our lives. So housing, discrimination, state college. Well, after college, Ward went to work for the California Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then he was persuaded, I believe it was by Governor Pete Wilson, to leave the public sector and try his hand at the private sector. So in 1973, he founded a land use planning company, which eventually became the most successful in California, probably the most successful in the country. He prospered financially, and he remained vitally interested in public affairs. He was appointed to the University of California Board of Regents in 1993, and I would have to say probably without an agenda, but within a year he acquired one. He became convinced that the university's affirmative action policies amounted to racial discrimination, and he decided pretty much single-handedly to take on a university system in which racial preferences were profoundly embedded and held with great enthusiasm by fellow trustees and by the college presidents and virtually everyone else with authority. The epiphany that led him to take this momentous stand had long-term consequences for California and the nation. The creation of Proposition 209 wasn't really Ward's idea. Two NAS members, Glenn Custard and Tom Wood, had come up with this idea, but being good academics, they had an idea and they didn't really know what to do with it. No knocks on them at all. It was a great idea, but it took a different kind of brilliance to make it into something that the majority of people in California would find not just palatable, but really the right thing to do. That's where Ward stepped in and made the campaign for Proposition 209. It was more than 10 years ago now, maybe memory fades a little bit. This was one of the transformational moments of our lifetimes. This was the point at which Americans took a long, hard look at racial preferences in the most liberal state in the country, or at least one of the most liberal states, and said, is this really who we want to be? And they said no. And while it's probably not historically accurate to give that victory to any one person, if there was any one person more than any other, the person who gave lift to this idea and made it seem real and credible to all sorts of people in California, that was Ward. The creation of that historic moment has changed the conversation, as we now say in public life, changed it to enough that in ensuing battles, not everyone has been won, but the issue has now become discussable. Is the way to achieve justice for the people whose ancestors suffered under slavery and Jim Crow laws, other forms of discrimination, to erect our own system of active discrimination? And the answer appears to be, more compellingly with each year that passes, no. Well, let me put in a personal note here. I first met Ward in 2001. He had read a short article that I had written on National Review Online about diversity on college campuses, and out of the blue he called me up and invited me to attend a meeting that he was planning at the Reagan Library. I accepted out of curiosity and some interest, and out of that meeting at the Reagan Library came my book, Diversity, the free copies of which are available out there. Diversity, the Invention of the Concept, of course, caused me no end of trouble. The book pretty much derailed my 20-year career at Boston University. I spiraled downward and ended up at what you see as my now currently sorry state. Thanks, Ward. Well, seriously, at that meeting that summer at the Reagan Library, I encountered a truly remarkable public man. I hesitate to say public intellectual because Ward is much more attuned to the common currency of public debate and policy than to the kind of stuff that we put into our journals. You get the sense that he's looking through the haze of debate to discern core principles. I had never met someone quite like that at the Reagan Library. He conducted, without notes and with great aplomb, a wide-ranging conversation with about 20 people with political views all over the map, kept this thing moving fluidly over the course of 2.5 days, entered without hesitation into debates on all sorts of issues, and left each one of them enhanced, clarified, moved the debate forward in a manner that was just breathtaking. And having spent 20 years as a professor and an administrator in a university, you would think you'd be used to all the forms of public rhetoric available, but I wasn't used to this. This was something new to me and gave me just a deep impression and love for who he is and what he could do. I understood then, better than I had before, how Proposition 209 passed. It had a general on its side of just the kinds of ability that won battles for Romans and Greeks. He's a formidable debater, and you've seen that. It's really no surprise at all that the other side is scared of him. And when the other side is scared, it resorts to some pretty nasty tactics. So another aspect of Ward's character has been made manifest in these recent years. If he's not quite bulletproof, he sure is capable of fending off just ferocious attacks with everything from brickbats to spitballs. He deals with angry crowds. He deals with them graciously. He knows how to face down people who are screaming at him. He gets the sweet voice of reason heard despite the cacophony of catcalls and character assassination and other tactics I won't even mention. Well, he's here to address us in part after he receives the Sidney Hook Award. He's here to address us in a bracing time. The movement to end racial preferences has just endured a tough electoral season. It was on the ballot in several states. It almost won in Colorado, but didn't. It passed in Nebraska. It went down to, I can't really call it defeat. It went down to subversion in a few other states where tactics were deployed to keep it off the ballot. But in this same season, we saw the election of Barack Obama, which suggested a proof of principle of what Ward has been saying for the last 15 years, that America seems to be ready to move beyond race, at least in some categories. So which is it? Is it the hardcore support for maintaining the regime of racial preferences, the now rather numerous category of race experts who basically owe their daily living to maintaining resentment and keeping these categories alive? Or are we at this point where the nation is about to embrace a post-racial definition of its public life? Well, I hope that Citizen Ward Connerly will throw some light on this in the next few minutes. But first, to business. The National Association of Scholars has a cluster of awards that we give each time we convene nationally. One of them is named the Sidney Hook Award. I suspect Sidney Hook's a familiar name to most of us here. Hook was a leftist in the 1930s who saw his way free of the allure of the then popular tendency for the left to adore Stalin. He was a student of John Dewey and brought into play both a sophisticated mind and a kind of pragmatic sense of how to lead public life. Eventually, Hooke, I think, became maybe the most prominent American intellectual who resisted the path, the totalitarian impulse, let's say, of the left. He's a hero to a great many of us. Founder of a predecessor organization to the National Association of Scholars. And I would think perhaps the symbol of public courage that stands out as his most salient characteristic today. I don't know how well Hooke is thriving as a philosopher anymore. His works are still read, but perhaps he remains more important to us for what he did to define public life than what he did in his academic works. The Sidney Hooke Award has been given 11 times before by the NAS. Some of the recipients are James Coleman, the sociologist who courageously put his neck out to, in the 1960s, revealed data that showed some unexpected aspects of school busing and school desegregation. Gertrude Himmelfarb, the great Victorian historian, Robert George, Princeton, Donald Kaplan. So this is an award that goes to illustrious company, which will be only more illustrious as we bestow on you. Very heavy. Sidney Hooke Memorial Award for vindicating the principles of fairness and merit in American higher education. Ward.
Damn, that thing's heavy. Peter, my dear friend, thank you very much. To the board of NAAS, Bruce and Victor, congratulations to you. I now know what Herb, what Senator Clinton meant when she talked about that 3 a.m. call in the morning. To my dear friends from the California Association of Scholars, Sylvia and Velma and others who have traveled to join me on this occasion, and to the full membership, thank you very much. I have, over the last 15 years or so, enjoyed the support and comfort of your members through the battles that we've waged in various states, and especially during my 12-year sentence on the Board of Regents of the University of California. We are here in our nation's capital at a time when the country is really demonstrating something that I think all of us in this room believe devoutly, and that is that the American people are inherently fair, and that the colorblind vision is in fact the right vision for America. In about 10 days, Senator Obama, President-elect Obama, a man who by America's one-drop rule is a black man, will become the 44th president of our nation. Although I did not vote for him, I think he earned the election by the rules of merit. He ran the best campaign. He made the strongest case to the majority of Americans, and I am willing to accept that verdict and to wish him well. I think we all do. President Obama will take his oath of office a few hundred yards from where Martin Luther King dreamed of that day when his 4 little children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And when he takes that oath of office, I'm sure that the spirit of Dr. King will be there with him, smiling broadly that the nation that Martin Luther King loved so dearly, if you read his works, you will understand the profound patriotism of King as he talked about the Declaration of Independence, as he talked about the Constitution, and as he waxed eloquently about what a nation we could be in this beloved community if we cast aside color. I think the American people are ready for that. When Peter and I and others 9 years ago convened at the Reagan Library, we talked about this great debate between the American people over the colorblind vision of our country and diversity, in quotes. It's a great conflict, because if you believe in color blindness, you cannot believe that it's appropriate for the government to be pursuing diversity. They are incompatible. And as Velma and I sat there on the Board of Regents trying to convince our colleagues about that, that conflict never escaped me. How can logical people believe that if the 1964 Civil Rights Act says we shall all be treated equally without regard to color, how can it be that we're practicing what amounts to racial discrimination in almost every act that the university finds itself engaged in? And so over the last 15 years or so, we have, many in this room, have waged an effective battle to get rid of race preferences, to get rid of the government's legitimizing its pursuit of diversity. Emphasis on pursuit, because it's the pursuit itself that is so outrageous and that ought to repel all of us. But this battle is not just about getting rid of race preferences. It's about trying to get rid of race. And I find that there is a tremendous task ahead in trying to convince even many in this room that the government should not be in the business of classifying its citizens by race. I remember when we fought the battle of Prop 54 in California, and the scars and the fight within our ranks over whether that was legitimate for the government to be doing. So I know that there is a tough chore ahead for all of us who want to get to that promised land of a beloved community, of all of us doing our part for our nation. Here, as I, a citizen, recommit your life to getting beyond race. That is, in fact, the ultimate destiny of America. And I think that the election of Senator Obama to be our president reconfirms that the American people are ready for this. And I think that the path for us to do that will in fact be a couple of more initiatives. It's the initiative route that brings to the public's attention the issue of race. That is a strategic way of asking the American people in a way that we have no other to ask, what do you think about race? The elections are not just in Nebraska, and Colorado, and California, and Washington. When you have an initiative in one state, the election is all over the country. And the American people in the privacy of their homes, they talk about it, and they vote. And when it comes to the question of whether that we should be checking these silly little boxes on forms, I think the American people really don't want to stomach that. And with the census right around the corner and our being asked in just a few months about race, I think it's a fitting time for us to all question, how do we move beyond race? So thank you very much for the honor which you have bestowed on me. I am delighted to be among you. I told Peter today that I want to become a member, and he's going to carve out some sort of citizen membership for me. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.